This morning I set up on an oak flat that's been select cut in the past between two clear cuts, and I'm about 3/4 of a mile from the parking area. I almost didn't come back here today because when I first started walking in the woods, I was about 80 yards from the car. I had a spike standing in the woods, and it did a circle around me like 18 yards away, trying to wind me. And it was a neat experience, but I thought, well, maybe, maybe the deer will be crossing here too, and I won't have to walk so far. But there was no food there, and that's one thing I've learned from past map reading challenges, is that you really want to be where food is, even in the morning and in the evening. So right now I was trying to catch deer going to bedding. I got a clear cut over here and on the other side of me, and I was hoping that maybe they would eat some acorns and then head off to bed. Didn't happen today. I also just recorded a hunting strategies video. I kind of talked a little more in depth of my strategy on why I picked this spot. I'll put a link to that in the description section if you want to check it out. But I'm going to head back to base camp and see if I can meet up with Shane and see how he did this morning, and we'll get ready for an afternoon sit. This afternoon is, if you've been following this series, I found a shed antler back in March when I came here with Garrett for the March Scout. And I said a prayer on the way here. I said, God, if there's a spot that I should focus on, please let me find a shed antler there. So I found a shed antler at this one spot, and I'm like, well, I'm going to come sit here one night and just see if this is the way of God answering our prayer. I like to do that because it helps me refine my ability to detect God's actions in my life. I mean, I might go there and not see a deer tonight, and that's fine. And then I just analyze the situation and say, okay, where did I get the impression that, I was going to maybe have deer activity here, get a buck here. And then in the future, I'll say, all right, I'm not going to take that approach, or maybe that's not how God answers my prayers. And so it helps me refine that listening ear. I need to go drink some water. But you get the point. Refine your prayer listening ear through hunting. That's what I like to do. Here's a boot track. Another one there. That's not my tread. That spot looked really good where I was at. I'm only about 70 yards from where I was in the tree. And you don't know how extensively it's been pressured. Those two boot prints that I just showed were not the same day. One's fresher than the other and sharper looking. So that could be why. I mean, somebody could have been hunting this pretty hard, and that's why I didn't see anything. When you live far away like I do, and this is my first time hunting here, you just can't predict what kind of hunting pressure you're dealing with. So hopefully tonight is a little more of a secluded, hard to reach spot, and hopefully I'd like to at least see some deer. Even if I don't get one, I'd like to see some. It's always encouraging and refreshing when you see some. See anything?
Yep.
All right. Any blood?
No. You remember last night I was telling you about when I'd sneak through the woods, sometimes I'd come up on deer.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing this morning, just looking for fresh sign.
Yeah.
Finally came to a spot I found hot sign.
Yeah.
Lots of fresh tracks, lots of old droppings, and finally found some fresh droppings.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so fresh it looked like it was still wet in my hand, like it just slid out of the butthole.
Yeah.
And so
You enjoyed that, didn't you?
yeah. Well, I enjoyed finding fresh sign.
Amen, man.
So anyway, I was easing along, and I was, trying to pick trees and looking up and talking to my camera and stuff, and I heard something, and my initial thought was it was a deer. And I got so enthralled with what I was seeing, and I kind of just forgot about it. And I should have took more time and just stood there and listened. And I took a couple steps, and there it was, a doe about 50 or 60 yards away, and she blew at me and I want to ask if anyone's wondering what all this is. I track deer with my dog, and we go through briars and prickly ash and buckthorn and everything else, and it cuts me up pretty good.
This is it. I'm hoping this is the night. Got my bow and camera gear. I'm also going to wheel in the deer cart and my boots, my gear, because I'm going to have to cross a water source. So I got to go in with the hip waders. I'm going to leave the hip waders and the cart right after I cross, and then head back into the woods from there. I just don't want to have to deal with crossing all the way out and coming back out to get this stuff if I get one. So I'd rather just carry it halfway there and dump it. It'll be easier for dealing with the deer. Let's see what happens. God be with this. God, please bless this hunt and teach me through it. The whole point of this is to discern if that was an answered prayer or not. Okay, it's gonna be tough. I barely got across. I fell a little bit, hit the bow a little bit. Hopefully the bow's okay. The deer cart, when I set it down, or fell down, it made a smack noise with the metal. So, like the metal pieces hit together. Not easy. So it's too deep for me to go right down the trail. I'm gonna have to try to fight through this stuff. I don't know if it's even gonna be possible to get out around on the shallow side over there. See how thick it is. I'm gonna have to try to get the deer through there, back over to the main trail. It's gonna be tough. I guess we'll do what we gotta do. Folks, as I got to within about 150 yards of where I was going, the buck sign started to pop out big time. I came upon a really nice, fairly fresh rub. Then I saw a bunch of scrapes in the area. There was a buck bed right by the scrapes. To say the least, I was very excited. Now, I hit a little bit of a snag. When I got to where I was going, I had my handheld GPS and I'm looking at it, and I get up to where I thought the tree was that I was going to get into, and the GPS is telling me it's a tree 10 yards that way. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, that's definitely not the tree. Now, when I was there, I took note of these dead branches around the base of the tree, and to make a mental note. And I'm looking at these dead branches, I'm like, man, there's dead branches, but it doesn't look quite the same. Maybe there was some leaves on the ones before. Maybe they just fell off. I don't know. So I was like, I don't want to waste a whole lot of time. I looked around. This looked like the right area, so I just started to climb the tree. And I had my first tree stand accident in my entire life. I got up to about 15 feet on this tree, and the bark was so hard, and the tree had a slight slant to it, that my tree stand was not biting into the bark so that it wouldn't slide, and it was sliding just a little bit when I would be climbing. And as I got to about that 15-foot mark, I lift the hand climber part up, and as it was in the air, the base of the tree stand actually broke away from the tree and went like that, and I just kind of free falled for a second, and then the seat grabbed, and my harness tether thing never even had a chance to cinch tight because I only dropped a few inches, and it was, the tether was right here, so it would have taken me about a foot till it got taut. And so I dropped, and my arm hit the
the seat of the tree stand and flexed at the same time and literally tore my bicep. So I actually took a little video of it when I got down. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I finished climbing the tree, I hoist up my bow, and I sit down, and I walked up to the tree this way, and I turned around, and I climbed the tree with my back to you. So I sat down when I got up, and there, 10 yards in front of me, is the tree I wanted to get in. And there was the GPS was saying it was a tree 10 yards that way. So I climbed back down and walked over 10 yards to get up into the right tree. Because I remember the shooting lanes were very minimal at this spot, and I needed to be in the right tree. When I finally did get to the right tree, as I was climbing up, I noted there was some deer scat on the ground right under me, 2 different sizes to the scat, so I figured there was a doe and a fawn. After I got set up in the tree stand, I decided to draw my bow to see if I even could with this bicep injury. And the reason why it tore so bad is I fell and my body weight was caught. I was holding my whole body weight with that one arm, and at the same time, that one arm, the bicep slammed into the metal bar on the seat, and it just basically sliced through the muscle somehow. So I was able to draw the bow, so I decided to finish out the hunt. And it turns out I picked the right spot. It all came together. I heard deer moving about an hour before dark, and eventually I saw it was a doe and a fawn. They came through exactly as I had sort of predicted in my mind. Like when I scouted it and I found this area, I thought the deer are going to come out of their beds, right out of this swampy area, and come right down this trail and start feeding on acorns as soon as they get in here. That's exactly what I said when I did the scouting video. So the doe and fawn came through, they went through my shot window right here, and then they stood off to the side of me about 15 yards away. There was a bunch of maple trees, so you couldn't see them real well through the maple trees, but they stood there for 15 minutes eating acorns under this tree right there. About 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, I heard more deer coming, and it was another doe and another fawn. Now the wind is blowing from the north in this situation, which is exactly what I wanted. And I was a little nervous because the first doe and fawn got downwind to me, and I was waiting to see if they were going to snort and run or anything, but they didn't. So I was grateful for that. And I don't know if it was a separate group of deer, if it was this same doe and fawn that came in separate here, but eventually this doe and fawn also got downwind to me. And then I looked over and they were I think it was the same ones. They were coming back, and the big doe came right to the base of the tree to my left, and I didn't want to move, so I didn't video any of it, but she was standing under me about 8 yards away, just looking around, looking around, looking around. Eventually she started eating again, and her and the fawn spent the rest of the daylight hours about 30 yards downwind of me, right there on the hillside behind me. And then I didn't get good video, but I did see more deer coming up out of the thick out in front of me, and they were up in the feeding under these acorn trees, and it was just so thick I couldn't get video. And then right at dark, when you really couldn't see to shoot real well anymore, I heard a buck making a buck rub about 75 yards away on the downwind side of me. So the buck, I don't know where he was bedded exactly, but there's a good chance he stayed out in the swampy area and got downwind of the feeding area and then came out into the main body of woods. And as soon as he came out, he made a rub. You could hear him just raking the antlers on a tree down there. And I didn't do anything about it because, like I said, it was right then and there. I wouldn't have felt like it would have been an ethical time to shoot because it was getting so dim with my visibility. Coming full circle, when I look back at that prayer request I made, I was if I remember correctly, I said, God, if there's an area I should focus on where I might get a buck or where I will get a buck, please let me find a shed antler. This was by far the best spot, that I sat. I finally got on the deer, and I didn't get a buck, so it's not necessarily that it was in God's plan for me to get a buck. However, this was the hot spot. I mean, I was on the deer, they were on me, and it was a good sit. So I got down and I hiked back to the car, and honestly, I was planning to come back and hunt by those scrapes in the morning. However, when I got to the water that I had to cross, I had all of my gear and the deer cart in my hands, and I slid down the bank when I was going to step in this one area, and there was all these, if you remember, there's all those saplings everywhere. My gear somewhere got hung up on a sapling. I slid down, and I just basically went down on my butt. And water just started pouring into my hip waders, and I'm just trying to keep my bow out of the mud and water, and I had to really edge my way to get back up. I was pretty upset by it, and my clothes, everything was soaked. So I decided, between the bicep injury and all of my gear getting all wet and the hip waders now are soaked on the inside, I was like, as much as I'd like to go back and try that in the morning, I'm going to have to go somewhere else, somewhere that's not so difficult, because I was a little concerned with the injury. And in fact, I have a doctor appointment. They weren't available for a couple weeks, but I'm going to have to get it checked out. My wife is a nurse. She thinks I'm going to need surgery. I can still shoot my bow, so I think I'm going to get through this hunting season at the very least. We'll see what the doctor has to say, but it was disturbing. I've never had a tree stand accident in my life, and I've climbed hundreds and hundreds of trees. I've never had one where the bark was so hard like that the tree stand was actually sliding on it. So in the future, I'm going to be a little more cautious when it comes to the bark. If the bark is just so hard and slippery like that, and if there's a little slant to the tree as well, I'm going to pass on that tree and just go to a better tree, even if it's not in the most ideal location.
Just got back to base camp. Be curious to hear how Shane did. He's not back yet. I don't look good in this light. It's a tough call, but I think I'm going to try a different spot in the morning. I'm just not sure which one yet.
Folks, it turns out that Shane went to town to get cell phone service, and he was in contact with Garrett. And I also had gotten a text from Garrett while I was in a tree stand. Garrett and his wife are on their way. So I'm going to start the next video for day 3 with them getting to camp. We'll hear what happened with Shane, and we'll hear what happens with Garrett and his wife. Until then, take care and God bless.